Now, the Canadian Member of Parliament of Indian origin, Chandra Arya, today in the House of Commons raised the issue of a petition spearheaded by a journalist from Surrey, Gurpreet Singh, and sponsored by another Canadian lawmaker, Sukh Dhaliwal. The petition seeks a fresh probe in the 1985 Kanishka bombing, suggesting that the Indian government agents may have been behind the attacks. Chandra Arya said that the petition was promoting conspiracy theories that were backed by Khalistani extremists. It's important to note that in the past, the conspiracy theory has been debunked by the Canadian government in the past two investigations, the 2010 John Major report and the 2005 Bob Ray report. It is unfortunate that the diabolical Khalistani plot to defame India has been bought by lawmakers in Canada and is even being allowed to be discussed and tabled in the Canadian Parliament. What is going to be the implication of it, especially at a time when Justin Trudeau and his government have been complicit in their effort with the Khalistani agenda to defame India and bring about ill name, especially when it comes to the Khalistani secessionist movement. First, it was about the killing of Nijjar, where Canadian government attacked the Indian government, saying that this was the quote-unquote work of the intelligence agencies of India. And now, 39 years after the attack of the Kanishka bombing in 1985, once again, it seems like the Canadian government is hell-bent on pinning India for its alleged involvement in the 1985 Kanishka bombing attack, despite a clean sheet being given and debunking these conspiracy theories that had been floated back in the two probes that had been conducted by two important individuals, a lawmaker and a former minister. Let's start off our conversation. Joining me on the telecast is Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. Let's hear it from you, Ambassador, particularly with regards to this diabolical plot that is at play. It's understandable that there are terrorist organizations and Khalistani extremists that have continued to peddle this agenda, that there is in fact intelligence from the Indian government side that was instrumental in orchestrating the 1985 attack. But when you have a lawmaker sitting in the House of Commons endorsing this conspiracy theory, going about sponsoring this petition, seeking signatures from parliamentarians to endorse their agreement, endorse their stamp on this particular issue, it's taking too far, which means that there would come a time that this is actually going to be discussed in the Canadian Parliament in front of Justin Trudeau. And it is obnoxious. It is something that cannot be fathomed. But it actually is going to happen.
Thank you, Megha. It is very unfortunate to see the depths to which the Canadian polity has fallen. It's extremely shameful. Is the mildest term I can use, and I think it requires the strongest condemnation. This is not only tolerance of terrorism. It is fostering and nurturing of terrorism in your bosom, in your soul, in your mind, in your heart. And it can never benefit a country to support terrorism to this extent. Already they are, turning Vancouver and British Columbia into a Chinese colony with Chinese police posts, which are operating all over North America, and picking up people at random, Chinese people who are dissenters, and taking them back to China. So the amount of lawlessness which is percolating into the system is very shocking, because even a person like Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, who makes threats against elected political leaders and against diplomats who are supposed to be inviolable. And here is this crazy terrorist who's openly making threats and still going around free. And not only that, politicians from India, including the leader of opposition, are behaving so irresponsibly as to go ahead and have a meeting with them and then advertise the meeting. And it takes it really to the extreme. I don't know what
Right.
to say.
But also, talk
about-
about it's one thing to foster terrorists and extremists in your country that are running secessionist agendas sitting out of Canada, but it's quite another when you're accusing a country of terrorist activities, calling India a terrorist nation. First, it was with Nijjar's killing, and now it is imminent that there is going to be a similar thing that is going to play out in the parliament, where in fact there is likelihood of a third inquiry to happen, and this is going to be for the benefit of the Khalistani extremists living there.
Yes, I agree, Mega. And I think if they do not take some corrective steps, the situation will only worsen, because these terrorists will feel more emboldened, and then they will start creating disruptions in Canada itself if their demands are not met, if their aspirations are not fulfilled in terms of whatever they are asking the government to do. So they will start, like we have seen in the case of Pakistan, in the case of Afghanistan, in the case of Iraq, in the case of a lot of these countries which have gone down that path of, helping and nurturing terrorists. So Canada, I hope that with the elections, some sense will prevail and some responsible people will come into power, and that they will do the right thing for the country, for the citizens, for the world. Thank you. Back to you, Megha.
Okay, I'm also being joined by Sanjay Lazar. His family has been a victim of the 1985 terror attacks that took place. Sanjay, in the statement that has been made by MP Chandra Arya, he's also mentioned a quote by Mr. Bal Gupta, whose wife also was killed in that terror attack, and Mr. Gupta has said that it's deeply frustrating. It's an attempt to gain publicity and support for terrorist activities. When such sort of activity takes place in Canada, and not just in Canada by extremist groups, but it's happening actually mainstream politics in the House of Commons. If you have enough signatures on the petition, this is actually going to be tabled and discussed in the Parliament. And the obtuse, you could actually think about the fact that there is going to be suspicion that is going to be raised on the government of India, which they at this point in time are claiming could be complicit in on orchestrating the crime itself.
Thank you, Megha. Thank you for having me and on your show. First of all, I've read MP Chandra Arya's statement. I've also read Dr. Bal Gupta's message that he put out. It is shocking to me, but first and foremost, we need to understand Canada has become a lawless society. The capital of Khalistan is already Vancouver. So we need to understand we have the largest amount of Sikhs in the world in our country, and I respect them and love them. But what you see the Canadian politicians doing, at a Baisakhi parade, they're talking about Khalistan. All three leaders are there. It's not only Justin Trudeau anymore. You have the NDP leader, you have the left and the right, everybody's there. And they're all celebrating the same killers, whether it's Parmar or whether it's, all these Bagri, Real, everybody is even Indira Gandhi's killers, all of them. And like Ambassador rightly said, when you have our own leader of the opposition going out there making ridiculous statements, that Sikhs aren't safe in our country, is another extreme that you're taking it to. So I don't put anything past Canada. However, be that as it may, when we come down to the brass tacks about holding another inquiry, or I say go ahead and have another criminal trial. Let's talk about the 200 hours of tapes that you destroyed, the CSIS destroyed. We have the transcripts, allow them in. Let's talk about Mr. A, Miss E, Miss X, Mr. D, all those witnesses who could not testify out of fear. Let's have them in camera recorded separately. Then you will see the entirety of this conspiracy. This is not a conspiracy that the Indian government hatched. It's not only Bob Ray and Justice John Major. It's also our Justice B.N. Kirpal report. It's also, let's not forget, Justice Josephson, who himself went through the criminal trial and apportioned. He may not have found these people guilty. He just did not find them guilty. That's about it. Because they couldn't cross-examine them. So let's look at the bigger picture here. I mean, this is nonsensical Khalistani propaganda that a few right-wing MPs are propagating, and I totally do not stand for it.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's shameful the way Canadian, the same Canada which 20 or 40 years ago went back and said this is a Canadian tragedy, and they marked June 23rd as the day of remembrance for victims of terrorism the world over, is today not allowing victims of this crash, this bombing, to come and pray silently on the 23rd of June.
Yeah.
Our
Okay.
families
Yes.
in the most
Yeah.
non-violent,
Absolutely.
not
Those are,
interfering
yes.
people.
You're right. You're right. Let me also get in Daniel Bodman, is the co-founder of the National Telegraph, is joining me from Canada. Daniel, what is now? How many signatures does it take for a petition to then be tabled and discussed in the Parliament? And we talk about the two probes that have the two inquiries that have already happened. They have debunked this conspiracy theory that had been floated in the past as well by the Khalistani extremists. They had raised questions about the capabilities of CSIS and the Canadian Mounted Police, and there were 4 individuals, terrorists, who were indicted, who were convicts, and every single one of them was acquitted. Parmar continues to stay. He's on the streets, he's living over there. What are the chances that there could be a third inquiry, and under Trudeau government it is going to sympathize with the Khalistani extremist sentiment?
Unmute yourself.
I'm sorry. As I mean, sort of a multifaceted thing here. Okay. So when it comes to parliamentary petitions, listen, most petitions are outright useless, right? Why do you sign change.org? It's so they can get your email for data. Now, parliamentary petitions in Canada, you need an MP to back it. You need a certain amount of signatures. Then it is read in the House. These are mostly useless. They mean nothing. We've done them before. However, if there is a coordinated political push behind the petition, then it means something. So they've done this before. For example, the Liberals did this on their M103 petition, right? They wanted to make hate speech laws and make it, everything is Islamophobia, and really push through some hate speech laws. So they got one of their MPs to sponsor a petition, put this petition through, and then created a subsequent motion based off that petition. So you'll really see here is, listen, if a petition gets signed, there's enough Khalistanis, it's going to get signed, okay? There's enough Khalistanis. Sanjay is right. The only thing I might disagree with him is the capital of Khalistan. Is it Surrey, Abbotsford, or Vancouver? Like that's the debate I have with Sanjay right now. It's going to get signed. It's going to reach the threshold. The real question is there a push inside the Liberal Party? We know the leader of the NDP, where he stands on this. Is there enough of a political push to then, okay, a petition's come through, are they going to then send a motion? Are they then going to vote for that motion to try and push forward a bill? That's it. Now, to get another inquiry back open, do they have then hope that the Khalistanis inside the Conservative Party, like Tim Uppal or Jaskar Hallan, when they Conservative gain power next year, will they really try and push this through and say, oh, we really need this? Maybe, but if there's enough of a backlash within the Conservative Party, I don't think the Conservatives will do it, because once the Conservatives start to hear from their base, which people will make noise, there's now enough of understanding of Khalistan and all this. And again, the Khalistanis are deeply, deeply involved with the mass migration and the immigration crisis and exploiting kids in Punjab. The conservatives don't like immigration fraud schemes being run through their country. So I don't see the Conservatives presiding over a motion to exonerate a terrorist attack. That's sort of the hope. What this really is this is Suk Dhaliwal. This is posturing. I mean, this is classic intimidation terrorist behavior, right? They want to intimidate. I mean, you saw this during June 23rd. They went to where all the victims were, and they took the Khalistan flags, and they wanted to dominate, because they're domineering sociopaths. They wanted to dominate the Hindus and the victims by waving Khalistan flags over the victims to say, look, this is our country. And this is an extension of that behavior, where they say, look, we're in Parliament, and we're going to run an inquiry now. And of course, the inquiry run by Suk Dhaliwal, it's going to be, who's the lawyer? Jagmeet Singh. And what's he saying? Oh, yes. Who blew up the plane? It was Modi. It was Modi. Who was in power? Congress. It doesn't matter. It was Modi who blew up the plane. That's what that's what they're going to try and prove because they're lunatics. So the real question is, it's gonna get read. Petitions get read in the House all the time. That means nothing. Will the Liberals and the NDP follow this up with a court? Because if the powers that be want this to go somewhere, they'll follow it up with a motion that they'll then pass. They'll then set precedents in Parliament. What this motion will say will probably be a very anti-India, pro-Khalistan thing. That will then move the needle forward. Then they'll try and take that motion, because then they can say, oh, the House has voted on a motion, this is already voted, use that to construct a bill. Will that bill come from a opposition party later? Maybe. I mean, the Liberals are set to be decimated in the next election, so I don't think after the next election they'll have much time for Khalistani nonsense, but this is the process in Canada.
Okay, all right. I also have with me Sukhi Chahal. He's the founder and CEO of Khalsa Today. He's joining me from Ottawa. And Mr. Chahal, now, it's interesting to note that this petition has been brought out by a journalist from Surrey. He's a Sikh Canadian. His name is Gurpreet Singh. In a situation such as this, where a narrative is being built and also being bought by certain segment of the people in Canada and perhaps across the globe as well, questions being raised on India, Indian intelligence, time and again. You are not just at this point of time inhabiting terrorists, harboring them, but also then severing ties with India, perhaps once and for all.
Yes, madam. First of all, I'm not in Ottawa. I'm in California. I just came back yesterday from India. I was in New Delhi.
Okay.
To answer your question, yeah, it is very sad actually. So whenever we hear this kind of stories, because basically, as you mentioned, and also Daniel and Sanjay mentioned, basically they are trying to build a narrative. It is all narrative war. And so they are trying to suppress the largely 95% community actually, the Sikh, the mainstream community actually. So that's their target. Indirectly, they are trying to build a narrative. Actually, no, it was the government of India or somebody else actually, so who did this? So that the people don't, so that they can project actually all the people, they can put their poster, this and that, they can justify, no, we have inquiry going on, they have not done anything wrong, actually, so it was the government of India. Unfortunately, we have to understand, it is very, very deeply frustrating whatever going on actually, so their activity. And especially it's opened up the old wound because the people like Sanjay and his family actually, so there's so many, more than 329 people died. Instead of finding the closure, we are trying to play. We are trying to play with their sentiments actually, because this is not a Sikhi. This is not the Guru Nanak Dev Sikhi teach. And this is very, very frustrating and are trying to open the old wound of all the family, and it is all garbage, and they are trying to build the narrative, and by building the narrative, they're trying to rewrite the history so that tomorrow they can tell the youngster actually, oh, no, this is government of India did this or other party did it. It is like assuming after 40 years, Al-Qaeda or somebody from the Pakistan say, or any terrorist organization say that 9/11 did not happen. It was America. America did it, or somebody else did it. And this is how they're trying to build. They build the whole narrative. It's all narrative war. It's a garbage, and I totally condemn this kind of nonsense activity.
Okay, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. What do you think is then going to happen to the India-Canada relationship? It's already plummeted to its lowest depths. Is there any way of ameliorating it till the time Trudeau stays in power? He has narrowly escaped yet another defeat just a couple of days ago. The NDP at this point of time not in support of Justin Trudeau. Again, we have Daniel Bodman, a journalist, talking about analyzing perhaps this may be his last prime ministership and not being able to win the next elections. But do you think the Khalistani sentiment would die down after he steps down?
Thank you, Megha. The point is as follows, that India-Canada relations are already at a very low ebb currently, and they'll continue at that low ebb for the foreseeable future. What is required is for the Canadian citizens and the Sikhs in Canada, in India, in USA, and all over the world, which form a large majority, to start raising their voices in every way and every form, in written word, in discussions, in demands, in expectations, in letters to the media, in interviews, that this sort of nonsense will not be tolerated. And if it's a very minuscule minority of Sikhs who are giving a bad name to the best and the proudest community in the world and in India, that community now needs to blacklist these minuscule numbers and put them into a corner so that they are named and shamed, and they do not have the courage to raise their heads in public. So those sort of steps are necessary, because once that starts happening, automatically the governing, elite in Canada will have to take stock of that, the changed political winds, and they will have to react accordingly. So that is more important for it to happen rather than just focusing on India-Canada relations, because India-Canada relations are being held hostage to this very stupid and idiotic matter, and the Canadian government, for it to sort of bow under the pressure of these terrorists, of the drug mafia, of the China mafia, of the money mafia, and to bend to their will and do as per their liking just because of money support and few votes, I think is a very short-term game. It's a very silly game.
Yeah, okay.
And it's a very damaging game for the country in the long term, because you cannot afford to spoil your relations with a country which is already the 5th largest economy of the world and which is headed towards becoming the 3rd largest economy in the next few years,
right,
which has a maximum population in the world, which has a maximum youth population in the world, which is a driver of the global economy.
Yes.
And more countries are going to ally with that country for their own economy, for their own future, for their own looking after their aging population, etc.
Yes, fair enough. Okay, Daniel, quickly coming to you now. A difficult situation that India and Canada, both the countries find themselves in wake of the Khalistani secessionist movement. What's the sentiment on the ground of the average Canadian?
Tired of this. I mean, again, all the shenanigans. Now, Canada has so many different problems that people thinking of like Khalistan area India, it's down the list, right? The more immediate problems, though, and it does relate to Khalistanis, is the immigration fraud schemes, these diploma mill schools, this basically exploiting and tricking kids out of the Punjab region to have their families pay tens of thousands of dollars to come to these fake schools where they then live in either a basement and they're all paying $1,500 a month of rent, and they're renting, and there's 25 students in one house. So now Canadians can't afford a house because Canadians aren't going to pay $50,000 to $30,000 in a mortgage payment. So it just makes sense to subcontract. This is all coming to a head. So Canadians can now see that Canada is a very, very pro immigrant community, right? We're in Canada, a nation of ideals. I'm pretty old stock Canadian by standards. Like 3 of my 4 grandparents were born in Toronto. My other grandfather escaped to Poland right before the Holocaust happened, right? So everyone has sort of an immigration story. It's very positive growing up in this, but we were a country of 30 million people, when Trudeau took over. We're now at 40 million, and most of that's immigration, right? So there's sort of this, and this comes with all these different, when you go at too high a level, it comes with some downsides. Okay. Canadians are now facing that and sort of want this gone. I will amend the ambassador's point of it. You're right about Sikhs speaking up. I would say the more important thing is the Hindus need to speak up in Canada. Listen, a lot of the best Hindu activists I know, and I'm in the community, are Sikhs, right? The real way to stop this is when the government, both the Conservatives, the Liberals, and NDP, see Canadian Hindus as a force to be reckoned with. Because right now, the Canadian Hindu community is just sort of not really politically active. They've adjusted to society, they got jobs, they integrated, they sort of abide by the deals of immigration as it's sort of written, but society's collapsed and that deal's sort of been tossed away. If Canadian Hindus and American Hindus and people of this don't stand up for themselves and assert themselves, then the Khalistanis are just going to continue to have free reign.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I'd say.
Okay, that's one aspect of it. But then again, Sanjay, the point is the big question mark, and that this could actually be a possibility. It could be a probability that there is a fresh inquiry, a third one that is issued, ordered, and a question being raised over whether it was the Indian intelligence that was complicit in the attack. In contrast, there has been time and again. Our channel NewsX, we have been demanding that we need to reopen the Kanishka files. Can there be action? Do you think there should be action taken by the Indian government over here to bring about a more damning report on this? And how can the Canadian government also be persuaded to actually reopen the case and break down page by page what actually happened, and actually then take charge of the situation and file the culprits, and actually justice be provided to the families and the children who continue to face this trauma because of the tragic deaths, where in fact there have been cases where a child has lost their mother and their father, so they've been orphaned, and that's a very tragic life to live.
Yes, Megha, I'm one of them. I lost my entire family, so I was orphaned as a kid. But be that as it may, couple of points. One is, I do not see Trudeau winning this election. I also see NDP suffering a huge defeat, like Daniel said. But let's understand that Pierre Poilievre is not going to sit in bed with India. Tim Uppal is going to make sure that there is still heat on this subject in the new government if they come to power. Number two, double jeopardy applies. Criminal trial is over. You cannot retry the case. If you have to, Canadians have spent over $140 million in the last 30 years. Daniel can correct me if I'm wrong. On the inquiry, I don't see them spending another $100 million on another inquiry. But if they do, I'm sure the Indian government will put their foot down and insist that evidence that was discarded in the criminal trial now be brought to bear. I have records. I have over 10,000 pages of transcripts and recordings and stuff. Let's put that all out there so that people can see. That's why I've been fighting all these years, Megha. And the very important point that you raised about relations between India and Canada, the ambassador said they're at an all-time low. Let me also say that since Mrs. Gandhi's days, we have never been friendly with Canada. If you remember in 1982, Mrs. Gandhi had asked Pierre Trudeau for Talvinder Singh Parmar to be extradited, not once, 30 times. And they denied it. So we've had rocky relationships. It's the one Western country where we've not done more than 3 bilateral visits in the last 50 years. Mm-hmm. So you can see, though we've got 70 million immigrants there, and we've got a whole lot of Sikh population there. There's a small minuscule, like Sukiji rightly said, small minuscule group of Khalistani troublemakers who are creating this problem. Sikhi is very different. Guru Nanak Dev's teachings are very different.
Yeah, you're right.
And
but then the problem becomes bigger and more urgent to resolve when it is the government itself that is sympathizing with the cause of the extremists, and howsoever small they may be, but when they have influence so big as this, and at a position where then you are at a point where you are cutting off all ties with the government of India. You are asking our envoys to leave the country. You are shutting down all your consulates over here in India. So if you are as tiny and non-significant and non-influential an entity and have been able to create such a discord at a level of diplomacy and a level of government to government, that's something to be concerned about. That's something to be looked upon very seriously.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.